me, baby. Stay with me a while. Said you give me life, but you never told me about the fire.
Hello, it is 3:23 p.m. Not Monday, Thursday, March 13th, 2025. Lovely afternoon here up in New England. My name is Mark Kulak, Kulacz. Somewhere behind me is a license plate that used to use. I don't know where it's. Probably behind one of the Lego structures right now. Of course, it's a Polish name, and I got that from my stepdaddy. I was born in Mark Nichols, Nichols, but whatever. Love all the names. And this is a research archival channel. Every once in a while, I will go through my full bio, but I'm not going to do that today. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for the people who support the channel. HughSatonic.live it's just the URL. You can just go there, and I got a Wikipedia archive on there with 1,000 or so pages, backed up by about 50,000 or so assets. And this is episode 1198 in our 6th year. When adding video shorts, I have about, I don't even know, 1,500, 1,600 or so shows, and several hundred additional videos which are shared from other people and archives and so on, which we maintain across multiple platforms: BitChute, Odyssey, Rumble, and YouTube. I've had 2 YouTube channels struck so far. It's noteworthy that, and of course I'm playing Sarah by Fleetwood Mac for no particular reason today. Sometimes I just leave one of my windows running, and it'll just keep going from song to song to song, and that one just happened to be up. I'm like, I haven't heard that song in a while. I always love that song. Brings back some good memories. So today, I just wanted to add some additional notes and color to the earlier broadcast from Jonathan J. Cooley, PhD, of GigaOhm.Biological.com. And what he did today was he played some parts of a video that you can find archived on C-SPAN right now, available worldwide, and it's from a United States government hearing early in the year 2000, and it's regarding gene therapy medicines. Now, one of the things which encouraged that particular hearing to happen in the United States Congress was the fact that there was a death. It's a unexpected death of a 18-year-old young American boy from the state of Arizona named Jesse Gelsinger, who had a medical condition which he had been able to continue to treat through various supplements and healthy lifestyle, but he made a decision to sign up for an experimental therapy, not because he would necessarily benefit from it, but because it was understood by him that perhaps other people could benefit from it. People who are more in need of medical assistance than he was. And as a result of the therapy itself and some unexpected circumstances, or I guess they say it was unexpected, or maybe it was improper administration, he died within a few days. And this was an extremely visible story for a multitude of reasons, which I've spoken about it before, but I don't think I've fully grasped all the reasons why it was so prominent. I mean, of course, it's a handsome young boy. All right, future. You don't want to see man or woman. You don't want to see the young future die like that. And you think, wow, it's because it's the future type of medicine. It looks really bad when there's such a fatal outcome to the use of it. I also did not know that he did not need it to survive. He didn't sign up because it was that or the possibility of not living much longer. That really hit home. I was like, wow, that's really changes how I view it. And it really highlights that he was taking on an experimental treatment, not having been told it was that death was a likely outcome. I mean, death is always an outcome of anything you do. I could walk down the hallway and go to fold my laundry and I could die. But it wasn't considered to be, when you're put under, when you're given anesthesia, when you're given even basic surgeries, there's always a very infinitesimal chance of risk, and which is just simply unavoidable. And I guess he didn't interpret it as a very high risk, and then he wound up dying. So there's a variety of reasons why it was so bad, and it needed to be addressed. The timing of this hearing is very, very important. Being early in the year 2000, the timing of the death of Jesse Gelsinger matters because it happened in 1999, and of course, so much of the future of medicine is revolving around the type of therapy that this young Jesse Gelsinger received. Well, of course, if it wasn't for COVID-19, we wouldn't be looking at any of this. I wouldn't have revisited it. I had other things which I was prioritizing, which is why I got involved in doing online research in the first place. So it was COVID-19 that encouraged us to start to go back to or revisit, like, what are the types of medicines that are being rolled out for COVID. And let me just say hi to you guys real quick. I need to get myself reoriented. Hello, Fletch. Hello, Fletch. Hello, Aaron. Hello, Azar. Lunchtime. Awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear. Hello, Ancient. Hello, Renee. Hello. Hello, Oysen. Hello. What do we got? The C-SPAN link. Thank you so much for that. That's exactly the one that I was going for. And sometimes I just have it ready to roll. And then today, I don't know. Maybe I needed a little bit more time for the caffeine here. Of course, I didn't get any notifications of Jonathan Cooey's show. Matter of fact, that's one good little thing to say as a starting off point. I didn't get a notification of Jonathan Cooey's show. And in fact, it wasn't until about 55 minutes or so in that finally I checked my phone because I know I don't get notifications. I'm like, oh, he's already going. I was listening to something else, and then I joined. So I didn't see the first 50 or so minutes of his broadcast, but he does a lot of repeated messaging in the beginning. So I don't think I need to rewatch every minute of that in order to capture what he already discussed. Okay, February 2nd, 2000, safety of gene therapy. Excellent, and thank you for the link. By the way, you have to add C-SPAN. If you're a researcher, if you're an archivist, you should have a list of, several sites, maybe a few dozen sites that you use during your searches. I love talking about research methods and tricks. There's a lot of things on C-SPAN that don't necessarily get picked up by Google. I don't know why. It usually does, but sometimes the best things on C-SPAN don't get picked up by Google. Or when you search on Google, the C-SPAN hits are just so far down that you'll never see them. So there should be several sites that you go to when searching for content, and you should use the search engines on those websites. Now, that could be, in this case, C-SPAN. Of course, you start with Google, and then maybe some people want to use Bing, and then you can use, whether it be YouTube, go directly to YouTube, or BitChute. BitChute search engine is actually very good for searching for content on BitChute, of course, and in this case, C-SPAN. So C-SPAN has a lot of stuff on it that is incredibly valuable content. Some of the best video clips I ever found are on C-SPAN. They're just sitting out there because they don't have people going through and cleaning up all of the old stuff that they want gone. At least they haven't done that yet. Maybe some AI in the upcoming future will do that, but so far it hasn't happened. So this February 2nd, 2000 video, the headline, Safety of Gene Therapy. Witnesses testified about medical testing involving gene therapy, a process of using DNA, genetic material, to correct a wide variety of inherited disorders, as well as some forms of cancer and heart disease. Mr. Gelsinger, and this is Jesse Gelsinger's father, talked about his son who died as a result of the tests. He was followed by two panels of officials and scientists who talked about a variety of topics, including if scientists had been truthful in informing patients of the risks of the therapy and why the FDA and National Institutes of Health had not shared information with each other. So the very fact that we just went through COVID-19 caused many of us to go, well, what the hell is this mRNA stuff? What's gene therapy? Gene therapy-based vaccines. What's a transfection? What is a vaccine really doing anyway? We've all had to go through a long learning curve. And understanding that there's a long history of gene therapy, which is well over nearly half a century, and even more when you go back to the modeling of DNA, and even longer than that if you go back to the Manhattan Project, etc., that led up to the therapeutics and the technologies, the advancements which were rolled out during COVID-19. So that whole history, starting to dig in, Jesse Gelsinger was somewhere on that timeline. Now, there are so many data points on the history of gene therapy. There's so many data points on the history of genomics because it's one of the longest running and the most heavily funded projects. I'm using a phrase right now, in all of human history. It has crossed so many disciplines, and it's been now running for several generations. And its roots go all the way back to World War II, actually, or World War I even. Trillions have been spent in it. Millions have been allowed to die because of it. There's never been a bigger, longer-running, more funded, life-consuming project than this advancement of the human genome. And because of that, it's very easy to state or make assertions that this could be behind the scenes amongst the main motivations and machines that drives a lot of world events that's not immediately apparent on the surface. For example, September 11th, 2001, we see plane hijackings on the news. We see planes flying into buildings, buildings collapsing, carnage, thousands of lives lost. We hear reports of the plane hijackings and then Iraq, and then helping potential known terrorists escape, and CIA collusion, and etc., and military contractors making more money, and that's what we see. And then you hear about all of the other nations in the Middle East and their particular geopolitical interests and resources, and Israel and Saudi Arabia and so on. But then you realize that the vast majority of what at least Washington, D.C. was talking about but going into September 11th was bioterror. Matter of fact, the word bioterrorism didn't even exist. It did not even exist until the fall of 1996 when it was introduced. So it's just thrown out there like, here's a new word that's going to guide everything. And then there was non-stop talk about biological terrorism and vaccine stockpiles and everything else. And then you realize, holy cow, what everyone was really thinking about was bioterror and protecting the citizens and the militaries against bioterror, which really means ushering out gene therapy vaccines. You don't see that, though, when you see planes and buildings. But there's far more money invested in this. I know you just see a few scientists, but behind the scenes, I mean, there's whole cities. Millions of people effectively are directly or indirectly hired as part of this effort. I think one of the biggest drivers of the computing industry of the United States has actually been part of this effort. I think the rollout of cell phone technology at the expanse that it is available, at the cost that it's available, is because of behind the scenes there's hopes that that technology could be part of this, and so on and so forth. Anyways, this event is on February 2nd, 2000. So Speaking of 9/11, this event happens. This is about 18 months before September 11th, 2001. This meeting, anyways. Meaning the death of Jesse Gelsinger is about 2 full years before September 11th, 2001. With all of the data points on the history of the gene therapy timeline and the advancement of genomics, the death of Jesse Gelsinger is, no offense to the surviving family of Jesse, it didn't raise up to a very high level because there's been many deaths and many tragedies, all different areas. So I didn't know why I would have wanted to focus on that one in particular until COVID, because the most prominent face in the health freedom movement, probably the most prominent scientist supporting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his potential pitch to be president and then to be vice president, and now as HHS secretary, and supporting him when he was at the Children's Health Defense and so on and so forth. Someone who's been prominent with Steve Bannon and so on has been Robert Malone, Dr. Robert Malone. I know most people don't know this name, but Robert Malone himself has highlighted that it was he who worked with the New York Times in 1999 and 2000 to be the whistleblower about what went wrong with Jesse Gelsinger. Some of those New York Times articles have been scrubbed, by the way, but I was able to find a couple. And it was, sure enough, Robert Malone speaking with New York Times, a columnist at that time, Cheryl Gay Stolberg was her name. I don't know her current occupation or situation, but Robert Malone was right there. And then Robert Malone at this time, as we can show from the papers, he was co-authoring papers with Inder Verma and a Dr. Inder Verma of the Salk Institute. And Dr. Inder Verma of the Salk Institute wound up in a position after the death of Jesse Gelsinger to be really the chairman of the review boards about the failure and the death of Jesse Gelsinger. Inder Verma speaks at this particular event on February 2nd, 2000. If you go to Houstonic.live and click on the G, M for Malone, Dr. Robert Wallace Malone, and if we search for Verma, let's see here. I'm trying to find, what I'm trying to do is find the date. So Robert Malone and Inder Verma are co-authoring May 17th to 18th, 1988 at Cold Spring Harbor. Robert Malone, Inder Verma, 1989. They have shared articles. Robert Malone, Inder Verma, they have shared works in 1993. Matter of fact, it's a 1993 article co-written by Robert Malone and Inder Verma from the Journal of Methods and Enzymology, Cationic Lipid-Mediated RNA Transfection. Huh. Sounds an awful lot like mRNA or mRNA type technology here. How about that? This article here in 1993 is meaningful because Robert Malone, and you can read the long letter from his wife Jill Glaspel Malone that was published in June of 2021. Robert Malone has stated that one of the worst experiences of his life was working with Inder Verma, that he has had lifelong post-traumatic stress disorder because Inder Verma is amongst the most horrible human beings to ever walk the face of the planet. And he took Robert Malone's work and, I don't know, just made Robert Malone feel sad. I mean, I don't know. It's not like he shot his dog and scratched his car or something. I don't know what Robert Malone's upset about, but he was very, very upset. And the time that Robert Malone was with the Salk and left the Salk supposedly because he just couldn't deal with he couldn't go on living anymore because of the trauma of working with Inder Verma. It was this close to being locked up in a cell to stop him from killing himself because of the sadness and because of the pain of working with Inder Verma. He's still writing papers with Inder Verma after the moment of that extreme tragedy, 1993. So the whole timeline of Robert Malone's severe, lifelong, debilitating post-traumatic stress disorder experience with Indoverma, the timeline just doesn't quite work out. So going back up a level here, Indoverma presents at this event. And Indoverma is now the chairman of the review committee. Indoverma was not part of the failed experiment on Jesse Gelsinger. He didn't. I'm not sure if he was even involved in signing off on it. He was obviously, as the head of the SALT, a leader in the field about where the field is going, the current status of the technologies, of the research, of the science, etc., the potential futures, how it's being pitched, the drawbacks. But I'm not sure that he was part of the signing off on doing that operation or even implementing it. He was simply part of the review board and the ethics board and so on. If we go to the page that I have for Jesse Gelsinger, Gelsing, here's the June 6, 2000 New York Times article titled, "Despite Ferment, Gene Therapy Progresses." This actually doesn't even mention Indoverma. It mentions the death of 18-year-old Jesse Gelsinger, and somehow it was, I'm just going to read a section here. The setback, of course, and this is June 2000. This is, 4 months after the C-SPAN captured United States Congressional Review event. The setback, of course, was the death of 18-year-old Jesse Gelsinger, who suffered from a metabolic disorder and had volunteered for an experiment to test gene therapy for babies with a fatal form of the disease. His presence was acutely felt at the conference. In his presidential address, Dr. Wu, and I don't know which event they're talking about here, asked those attending to stand in a moment of silence for the young man who has given his life in pursuit of an ideal treatment and to assure him, in spirit, that the scientific community is galvanized to do our very best to help fulfill his dream one day. Mr. Gelsinger's death, Jesse Gelsinger's death, has had ripple effects throughout the field. It touched off a discussion of financial conflict of interest in gene therapy experiments, promoting the society to issue guidelines barring members from running clinical trials if they had a financial stake in the companies sponsoring their studies. It also caused a slowdown in human experiments. An official, this just blows me away, an official from the Food and Drug Administration, which recently issued more stringent regulations to govern the conduct of gene therapy clinical trials, said that requests to test gene therapy in people had dropped off sharply in recent months. Dr. Robert Malone, a researcher at the University of Maryland, note the date here and where he's at, says, "The field is in transition. I think it's transitioning to a more sober, realistic recognition of what is achievable. I believe there's a new humility in the field." Now, I mean, I don't disagree with what he's saying there. I mean, it's a very, and I mean, Malone is an ace at this. You know, he says such diplomatic things. I can't disagree with it. It's just, imagine if someone walks up to you and shoots your dog in the head and then says, "Oh, man, one of the worst things that people can do is shoot someone's dog in the head." I, as a leader of the Don't Shoot Dogs in the Head Society, really feel your pain. It's kind of like that. Okay, I think what's going on here is somehow Robert Malone, and he's a researcher at the University of Maryland. If I may just say it, what the hell is he doing commenting here? Why is he involved here? Okay, so he's worked with Indoverma before. He has had a friendship with Indoverma. He's had, obviously, an intellectual property connection relationship with Vical Corporation. Vical is also making DNA transfection technology, DNA gene therapy technology out in San Diego. Vical Corporation, where Robert Malone was in 89 and 1990, where he has some intellectual patents, is prominently mentioned in this book that was published the week after September 11th, 2001, called Big Shot AIDS Vaccine, which took 3.5 years to write. is about the AIDS vaccine, the advancement of the AIDS vaccine, and of course how the AIDS vaccine-based platform technology could be used to provide, immunization against other things like anthrax and smallpox. Interesting that the book came out the week after September 11th, because if it wasn't for the events of September 11th, if there was instead a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center, such as terrorists performing an act of bioterrorism, such as using crop dusters, which they were trained to fly in New York City on, let's just say, Thanksgiving Day parade, there would have been an event which justified a United States military invasion in the Middle East, and most in particular would have almost certainly mandated those troops be vaccinated against anthrax or smallpox agents. Of course, because of the bioport shutdown, it was not going to be possible to use the old anthrax vaccine. And Merrill Nass was very prominent in U.S. newspapers at the time that the old anthrax vaccine was too dangerous, meaning the Vical vaccine was going to be the only vaccine which would have been available, or the one from VaxGen Corporation. Very important things. Just because something bad happened, that doesn't always mean that the opposite of that was nothing at all. Usually it's bad option A or bad option B, or maybe one of the bad options is more bad than the other options. Either way, though, one of the biggest mistakes that people make when trying to understand September 11th is thinking that it was going to be all sunshine and bagels and happiness and just making love in the grass, or it was September 11th, 2001. And that is the wrong set of options. So, Big Shot AIDS vaccine, here. Very important book. Of course, all of these other books, Judith Miller's Germs, Richard Preston's book, the Cobra event, which is a biological terror event in New York City. They're all talking about it. It's the worst kept secret in Washington, D.C., that there's going to be a biological terror event. Oddly enough, it didn't happen. Anyways, what the hell is Robert Malone doing here? Why is he suddenly a guy from University of Maryland in this field, in this book, in this New York Times paper article? And why is he sort of being positioned as a subject matter expert? I mean, he has some field subject matter expertise, but he's almost coming off as a field leader. And I think that Robert Malone was positioned at this time to get in front of Inderverma. I believe that Robert Malone, because of this unexpected failure of this particular experiment on Jesse Gelsinger, there was a lot of negative press, and I believe that there was fear that this was going to interfere with the possibility that some of these gene therapy companies, such as Vical, were going to be properly positioned in time to provide an experimental anthrax or smallpox vaccine for the U.S. military, because we can't go to war unless we have our troops protected against anthrax or smallpox. And it's the only captive population in the United States at that time that we could have demanded to take experimental gene therapy. Another observation that supports the speculation that Robert Malone is being positioned here by someone to get in front of Inderverma is the fact that this article doesn't even mention Inderverma. This New York Times article, which I believe was written by that Cheryl Gay Stolberg, doesn't even mention Inderverma, and arguably Inderverma is a far more important person than Robert Malone on the topic of the failed experiment with Jesse Gelsinger. After all, it was Inderverma that was at the head of the review board, and it was Inderverma who spoke with authority at that February 2nd, 2000 Senate hearing on safety and gene therapy. And I believe Robert Malone was a part of a bigger machine, which was told, you're going to get in the New York Times, you're going to get in front of this, and so on and so forth. So, another absolutely fascinating thing happens here, okay? Somehow, after the death of Jesse Gelsinger, there's a cascade of events. There's a review board. There's a lot of visibility. There's a lot of concern. There's investor hesitation. At this point, after this article in 2000, Robert Malone leaves his job at the University of Maryland and then joins the United States Uniformed Health Services, along with his wife. I've never had the same job as my wife. I mean, maybe someday, we'll own a cupcake stand or something. I don't know. We're in the business of having, running our house together and going through our joys and our sadness together. But I don't, change jobs all the time with my wife. It's just, I guess it's good for people who do. I don't know. But Robert Malone and his wife, Jill, both joined the United States Uniformed Health Services, where they are then tasked with going to a rural area of Pennsylvania, Windber, and taking a hospice care facility in a small town and setting up a cancer research facility, which is then going to have a special relationship with the United States Army via Walter Reed Army Medical Hospital, and they're going to take on the study of breast cancer in the United States military. And they're going to use a high-speed data pipe, Internet 2 technology at that time, where Robert Malone's boss at the University of Maryland, Bob Gallo, happened to be on the board of directors of the Internet 2 consortium. So, for some reason, Malone leaves his University of Maryland job and is now taking up a position where he both is designing and setting up all the IT infrastructure and even training the scientific director of this Windber Medical Center, Richard Somiari, a Nigerian immigrant who's just came to North America for the first time, and it's questionable if he even had a PhD to become the scientific director of this institute that's going to get a snapshot copy of all cancer data in the United States military. Pretty darn interesting, because that's the type of stuff you would want to capture and observe should there be an increased incidence of cancer in the U.S. military, perhaps being caused by an experimental gene therapy vaccine from Vical Corporation. And then, crazy of crazy, on the day of September 11th, 2001, 10 miles away from that research center on a hilltop in rural Pennsylvania, Flight 93 crashes. Or I should say, Flight 93 doesn't crash, because the only thing missing from the crash site is an airplane. Someone decided to shoot a missile at that hilltop and say it was Flight 93. And then they were worried about anthrax. It's one of the most bizarre stories. I remind you, I'm not saying that Flight 93 didn't exist. I'm not saying that Flight 93 didn't crash and everyone on board didn't die. I have not researched that. But God is my witness, a plane did not crash there. A plane could have crashed at another, perhaps, significant site of intelligence value, of military value. I don't know. All I know is that plane did not crash there. So Robert Malone is this freaking wrapped up in Gelsinger case, in hijacking the work of Inder Verma, getting in the way of him becoming the face of, what type of transfection technology going to be used, and even taking on a key role in, how the U.S. military is going to respond to the use of experimental gene therapy on several million American civilians who have signed up for military service. This is currently considered to be the greatest hero in the medical freedom movement. Anyways, what would be a sign that perhaps Robert Malone was trying to hijack the role of Inder Verma? Oh, by the way, Inder Verma, as of 2017, after a 35-year career, highly celebrated, one of the most beloved people in the field of molecular biology, suddenly several people came out of the woodwork and said that he was a misogynist and did various things with women, etc., and destroyed him. He was kicked out of the Salk. He had awards taken away, and he's never to be heard from again. And then Robert Malone and Jill are writing long letters about Robert Malone's endless tragedy and nights of lost sleep because of just how awful he was treated by Indoverma. So how convenient that Indoverma's side of the story can't be heard. Indoverma has to stay quiet because he was silenced by the Robert and Jill Glasspool Malone machine. Anyways, if you were to say, gee, what would trying to hijack gene delivery technologies look like? If you wanted to hijack, if you wanted to assert yourself as the leader of the field of the different options of gene delivery, okay, different types of transfection, what would it look like? Well, of course, you would want to be someone that would be, maybe running an organization regarding gene delivery, okay? So if you go to Robert Malone's page, and you just have to look at his resumes, and I think that the 2017 resume is really the most important one here. In 2001, Robert and Jill Glasspool Malone, while they are at the Winburn Institute, and before September 11th, 2001, and this is after the death of Jesse Gelsinger, created the Gene Delivery Alliance. It is almost proof that Robert Malone hijacked the ethics response to the death of Jesse Gelsinger because they needed to get it under control before September 11th, before what was actually going to be a later fall 2001 biological terror event. And if you're looking for some metadata that Robert Malone knew that he needed to get out of Dodge when it came to September 11th, 2001, I think he left the United States Uniformed Health Services almost immediately after September 11th. Pretty odd. It doesn't matter where he was on the day of September 11th, by the way. I know another journalist, George Webb, has said that matters. It doesn't matter. What matters is a detailed study of all the days leading up and all the days afterwards, and that's what we've done here. So while you see this C-SPAN event and Indoverma presenting, you need to understand Robert Malone is right there. Robert Malone was obviously involved in some of the intellectual property which included, if you look at the patents from Robert Malone himself, okay, I'm going to pull them up. Here it is. Here's the United States patent. Induction of protective immune response in a mammal by injecting a DNA sequence, naked DNA. Robert Malone is not the primary author at all. He's currently in Chicago. This is 1989, by the way. Robert Malone is, I think, about to join Vical. The primary author is Phil Felgner, who did win an award in 2021 or 22, along with Weissman and Carrico in Europe. John Wolfe is a second person. Some people really consider it to be John Wolfe's intellectual property. He died at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. He was only in his 50s of a fast-acting cancer. John Wolfe, by the way, was also chosen by a Dr. Joshua Lederberg, head of Worldwide Planetary Defense, as the person to co-author a paper on gene delivery with. Just saying, or gene therapy, history of gene therapy. Now, the next person, Gary Rhodes, very interesting. Gary Rhodes also died, well, I wouldn't say young. I think he was in his early 70s of a heart attack. He died in 2012. But he's definitely a bigger contributor to this intellectual property than Robert Malone. It's noteworthy that one of the most prominent co-authors of Gary Rhodes is Richard Houghton. And Richard Houghton company, Multiple Peptide Systems, is a company that is actually having its product regarding dealing with breast cancer, the primary product tested at the Winburn facility. That's odd. That's pretty odd. So Malone and Richard Houghton at that Winburn facility also have this connection. And this is Vical. You can see Vical, and Vical's in this pre-9/11 book on the big shot AIDS vaccine and anthrax and smallpox vaccines, etc. Again, Vical is a word that no one wants to mention. People will say all kinds of other names for other companies. But you can really tell who's who in this research community. If someone doesn't want to say Vical, they are deceiving you, and they're lying. It's that. Vical's peak stock price, by the way, was I think in the month before, September 11th, 2001, and then it crashed. And Vical stayed in business until October of 2019, when they finally closed up shop before COVID-19. Just another one of those odd freaking data points. If you don't think this stuff is all connected, I don't know what else to tell you.
Now we need to add some additional really important detail going back to this Big Shot AIDS vaccine book. You see those names up on top? Phil Felgner, John Wolfe, Gary Rhodes. They are all in this book. They all just happen to be in this book, which took 3.5 years to write. That was published and printed and available to the general public the week after September 11th, 2001, almost as if it was being put out there to prepare people, to seed a narrative and get people prepared. And another absolutely amazing fact is that the primary character in this book, or one of the 2 or 3 primary characters, is a Dr. Nancy Hagwood, who is the scientist or the doctor who approached the FBI in 2007, several years after this book, and said that Bruce Ivins was someone who was mentally capable of sending out the anthrax letters because of some run-in that she had with him all the way back in college, which is just absurd. And this also means that the person who said Bruce Ivins was capable and likely even to have done to send out the anthrax letters was someone who's known Robert Malone since 1989. And this Nancy Hagwood is the 3rd most frequent co-author of Robert Malone's postdoc advisor, Murray Gardner. And the totality of all of these coincidences it's impossible to overlook.
But the fact that Indoverma's presenting at this event is so important. Now, Indoverma, I mean, look, he's still selling the potential of gene therapy. That's still true. But the more I listen to some of these scientists, the more I'm really focusing on the little nuances. I used to be more dismissive, okay, of many of the scientific leaders in this field. Some of them are really willing to subject people to potential death so long as it advances the science. And then others are a little bit more reserved about it and seem to be trying to find ways to balance the narratives without necessarily bringing up all of the risk, okay? And I also think that some of them, if you listen to them, they kind of hint that they know the extent of what the technology can provide anytime soon. It's just not good. It's not going to meet the hope. Okay. So, but they do feel as though, and they're actually justified in feeling this, that perhaps certain types of tumors and cancers may be treated with advances of some of these technologies. And they believe that as they're able to take a few steps in this direction, that direction, that perhaps what's capable in the future will be even further. So I think Indoverma, I mean, if you just have to listen to him, watch Jonathan Cooey's show from today, just listen to Indoverma. You'd have a hard-pressed time trying to actually imagine Robert Malone curled up in a corner crying and shaking because of the trauma upon Robert Malone by Indoverma. You would have a really hard time imagining that scenario unless you have a really good imagination. The other part is the fact that this event is being kicked off by United States Senator Bill Frist. Now, I really never knew much about Bill Frist. What I do know is that he is sitting in the United States Senate seat, which used to be filled by Esty Skafoffer. And I just did a video about Esty Skafoffer, who was assassinated in the Senate, I believe, just several weeks before JFK. Estes Kefauver of the 1962 FDA Kefauver-Harris Amendments, or Antitrust Act, which led to those amendments, including the implementation of efficacy. So isn't it odd that this review board of the safety of gene therapy is being chaired by a senator from Tennessee who's in the seat of that Kefauver used to be in, who might have actually been assassinated because of his involvement in the implementation of those FDA amendments and the notion of efficacy itself, which is also one of the roadblocks of personalized medicine. Also interesting that Bill Frist is sitting next to the late Massachusetts Senator Ed Kennedy. He was typically called Ted Kennedy, who's the uncle of the current HHS Secretary RFK Jr. Ed Kennedy is also a giant in this field. But let's just go over a few more very interesting data points here, because upon the day of September 11th, 2001, Bill Frist immediately interjects himself, because he has a background in medical, as the anthrax expert in the United States Congress. And then Bill Frist goes on to put forward all the bills which provided us things like PEPFAR as well as BARDA. You know, BARDA, that Robert Malone had a very long time position as a special employee or contractor for. BARDA also played probably one of the key roles, or the top roles, in the United States government in supporting some of the early stage therapeutics for COVID-19, as well as providing the experimental vaccine candidates for Ebola in 2014.
And just in case you forgot, and since we are, or at least I, am talking a lot about Robert Malone, remember the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which made a large investment in that Ebola vaccine, a vaccine which was, for the most part, initially developed by the Public Health Agency Canada, the PHAC, at the NML, the National Microbiology Laboratory in Canada, and then sold for a song in 2009 or 2010 to Newlink Corporation, a United States company. It was the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, I believe, that made a request for Robert Malone, and Robert Malone specifically, to be hired as a contractor by Newlink Corporation, where he worked for Thomas Monath. Thomas Monath was also at that bioterrorism hearing with President Clinton and Joshua Lederberg and Donna Shalala and so on, all the way back in 1998. And the DTRA made a request that Robert Malone effectively be the middleman in handling the arrangements of taking that Ebola vaccine from Newlink Corporation and bringing it to Merck Corporation, or at least handling the details of taking that technology to Merck and having Merck Corporation manufacture that Ebola vaccine.
How is it possible that all of these people who are involved in anthrax and bioterror and everything else all just happen to be surrounding the dad of the dead, now deceased Jesse Gelsinger, telling him, really sad about what happened, but man, the freaking potential of this gene therapy is unlimited. Isn't it odd that all of these are the same individuals who had key roles with respect to the potential event of bioterrorism in 2001? Maybe even would have been involved in decisions in which type of experimental gene therapy vaccines to use on the United States military. Matter of fact, the role that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is in right now as the HHS secretary, let's just look at this photo here. I share this photo a lot, but I think most people don't really quite understand how remarkable it is. This is the collection of articles I have on the Winburn Medical Center. Here is November 4th, 2000, and this is United States HHS Secretary Donna Shalala in Pennsylvania highlighting how excited she is about the investment in this new cancer research center for the U.S. military that Robert Malone is going to set up all the IT infrastructure for, and then train a Nigerian immigrant, Richard Somiari, to become the scientific director and co-author a bunch of papers with him about electroporation and so on. This is crazy, which means 20-something years ago, a predecessor of RFK Jr. was actually one of the people at the tip of the spear of making sure this Winburn Center got the money. You know, the Winburn Center, which was set up in large part by one of the largest supporters of the current HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that person being Robert Malone. Robert Malone, who hijacked the messaging, I believe, from Inder Verma. And now Inder Verma can't talk because he's being accused of molestation and misogyny and who knows what other kind of ugly things. This little research center, which almost had nobody in it, I want to emphasize, I don't think there was ever really meant to be a big staff there. I suspect that this center was supposed to be a location which was going to allow the extraction of the cancer data in the U.S. military to either corporate interests or maybe other big data analytics companies to be processed. They weren't actually expecting to do the research there. I think it was almost a front. And if you go there today, you'll see a great big empty parking lot. That was always the plan. Of course, September 11th didn't happen like they said it did. So after that, it was just kind of an empty parking lot. I don't really know. Things just kind of fell apart from there. Of course, Robert Malone and Jill Glass Malone even left their jobs at the United States Uniformed Health Services. No more need to set anything up there. So Bill Frist, the fact that he's kicking this thing off is just absolutely remarkable. I did a video earlier. Actually, I did it yesterday. I cleaned it up last night and I reposted it this morning about how the JFK assassination files aren't getting released, and I don't think they're going to be released because I suspect that the JFK assassination is not about, a Marilyn Monroe sex scandal or, weapons deal with Russia or, I don't know, a cult or anything else. I suspect that it's much closer to the idea of advancing the field of human genomics. And I suspect that Kennedy was actually pretty close with Kefauver. Kennedy was also pretty close at that time with the Pope. The old Pope was actually dying who wasn't really in there for that long, and then the new Pope came in and felt really sad that JFK got shot. Of course, it's the Vatican that I believe has one of the largest archives of experimental data on testing the human immune system known to man. And that, of course, is really the lost notebooks of Joseph Mengele and what was done in Nazi Germany. That stuff, I believe, is all currently captured and protected at the Vatican. And I believe the Vatican thought that they were going to have a friend in JFK, but I don't think JFK was aligned enough with the Vatican. As much of a globalist or liberal as he was, I don't think he was necessarily willing to sell the United States out at the level that was necessary. And I don't think Estes Kefauver really was either. And these are the stories that no one wants to talk about. Much cooler to talk about a sex scandal and the JFK assassination or the CIA or whatever. Even though the pursuit of understanding the human genome has been agreed upon by organizations as the largest and the most well-funded and the most important pursuit in all of human civilization. You're just throwing that one out there. And the person who's sitting in Kefauver's seat is kicking off this hearing. Also, this was even more remarkable. It was either the father of Jesse Gelsinger, who spoke here, or someone else who actually brought up Richard Lugar the senator from Indiana. And that is remarkable because it's Richard Lugar who, along with Senator Nunn, set up the, of course, there's the Nunn-Lugar, I forget what it's called, the Arms Control Act or whatever, the Nunn-Lugar program, which performs the basis of what became a new United States military intelligence agency called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the DTRA. The DTRA, their work was much inspired by David Hamburg. And this just goes on, it gets even crazier from there because Richard Lugar was both the ambassador that restored the United States ambassador relationship with the Vatican in the 1980s because the United States didn't have that position. It went unstaffed for like 80 or 100 years or so. That's interesting. And Richard Lugar was the most prominent voice in the United States Senate in supporting the assignment of Dr. Margaret or Peggy Hamburg to run the FDA and spearhead the movement of the implementation and advancement of personalized medicine in the year 2009 in the Obama administration. And she ran the FDA for 7 out of the 8 years. And she's still behind the scenes a very active person. I don't know if it's really. Oh, by the way, she was also had her college entrance letter written by Joshua Lederberg, and when you look for the Margaret Hamburg appearances on Charlie Rose, she was actually escorted there, or chaperoned, perhaps is a better word, by the elder Joshua Lederberg at the time. It's just remarkable how much is there right around the surface. Right around the edges. Watch Jonathan Cooey's show today. The small amount that I was able to capture, he was able to pick up on a lot of very important contextual parts about things such as what Inder Verma said. He did a really good job breaking it down. And someone with his particular scientific background and bench background and so on, and performing transfection, etc., is really necessary to pick up on a lot of those things. But historically, this event, the death of Jesse Gelsinger, and we have Robert Malone to thank. Robert Malone's insistence on remaining in the spotlight, his insistence on being the psychological warfare expert. Oh, by the way, psychological warfare is a joke. There's no such thing as psychological warfare. There's telling the truth and lying, and that's it. You don't need to write a book about that. Some people lie. Some people don't. That's it. There's more creative ways of lying, but that's all you need to know. There you go. I just saved you guys $20. You don't need to buy the 27th Generation Psychological Warfare book by Robert and Jill Malone. Not necessary. Just look for people that aren't going to lie to you. Anyways, we really have him to thank. If he didn't keep sticking in the spotlight, I wouldn't think he was that important. But I guess he really is. And now that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running the HHS, instead of being a vice president, they wanted him to be a vice president. Things are not going according to plan. People are saying stupid things. The plan is continuing to go off the rails. They are now in a position where they have to admit that there's been nearly 1 million drug overdose deaths in the United States over the last, 10 years or so. And that it's the main reason life expectancy has gone down. And they have to admit that they have prevented people from hearing this. They have, and possibly they are starting to be exposed as having enabled a mass casualty event to create a narrative of deadly novel virus, again, to simply advance their stupid technologies. And that's the good possibility. Because if they're trying to advance their stupid gene therapy technologies, well, then that gives me, at the very least, a hope that maybe they think that these technologies could advance life. The dark scenario that I have to throw out there is an even worse case scenario, and that is potentially there is knowledge that these technologies will never work, which simply means that the whole idea of them ever working is a hoax, which then means it's a hoax that was used to murder people for political means. And that's it. And that is even uglier. I would rather someone, have false hope that all this technology is going to result in us living forever and having beach pods until the day we die. Maybe they do think that. But the really dark scenario is they already knew it would never work. It was just a matter of murdering people that they didn't like, that didn't vote their way, that didn't bow to them. That's a really scary scenario. Let's hope that that's not the case. But if it is, let's deal with it. Anyways, these are the things behind the scenes. There's an awful lot in this 2000 hearing. You think it's a long time ago, 25 years? It's already been 5.5 years since the start of COVID. All right, guys. Thank you. Take care. God bless.